So I'm going to make a start, and I wanted to actually thank Gary today because he asked a question earlier on the thread for this event about how he used his inner voice to create situations that gave him the excuse to drink when he was drinking. And so therefore I decided to take a little bit of a step back and think about what our inner voice is and how we might have used it when we were drinking. So as always, I've got notes here, so when I'm looking, it's knocked over my candle with my aromatherapy oil on it. So when I'm looking over here, it's because I'm looking at my notes because I have prepared and planned. I know, surprise to me as well. Okay, so I actually think that when we're drinking, we actually amplify our inner critic more than we need to. So when it comes to changing our drinking habits, we've actually got to undo some damage that we've done in that area as well in order to get to the place where we want to be. So what do I mean by the fact that we've amplified our inner critic? Well, Gary this morning talked about the fact that he used to create arguments with his wife that used to make him feel bad, and because he felt bad and like a terrible person, his inner critic would go, oh, the only way to solve this is to have a drink, and therefore it justified his drinking. I hope I'm not paraphrasing too much, Gary, but I actually recognised that in myself as well, which is it didn't take much for me to be able to go, oh, well, it's been a stressful day, it's been a terrible day, I'm bored, I'm this, I'm that, I'm too fat, I'm not lovable, I'm all these things, and use them as an excuse to drink, which means that your inner critic is becoming an enabler for you to drink, and that you begin to allow that inner critic to grow and develop because it gives you an excuse to drink all the time. And so we actually make our inner critic bigger, more important and stronger than it needs to be. And that's actually quite frightening. So we would have found so many excuses to normalise the drinking that we're doing, because deep down, obviously, I don't like to use the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, but there is another inner voice that says, you know what, if you really want to look after yourself, you shouldn't drink so much. You know other people don't drink as much as you. And, you know, drinking at lunchtime really isn't a good idea. Do you not know how shit you feel after this morning? That voice gets drowned out by that inner critic voice that went, yeah, but, you know, but you'll feel better if you have a drink now because it's easier to drink on a hangover, and, you know, and you're feeling tired, so you need pepping up a bit, and you're feeling miserable. Of course you're feeling miserable, you've got a hangover, so you deserve a drink. So what we've continually done over years of drinking is amplified our inner critic and drowned out that part of us that's got the common sense attached to it, that was saying, you know what, you shouldn't really be doing this. We gave ourselves reasonable justifications to carry on with our really bad habits. And that feeding that inner critic and that inner critic feeding our drinking becomes a habit and a loop in itself. And I guess when I think about this, because all the time this comes up on the group, which is, but we're really clever people, like we hold down jobs, and some of us have been to university, and we can read books, and, you know, we know stuff and we know all of this stuff, so how come we still drink? Well, actually, if you think about it, we've got some really deep embedded behaviours, and it's not just the act of picking up a drink and supping it. It's the effect that drink has had on our brain. It's the effect that drink has had on rewiring our reactions to everything. It's how much we've allowed our inner critic to dominate and how much we've drowned out that good common sense voice. All of those things. And it does come back, actually. Sharon, you're just saying that you reckon it's 99% back. In fact, I wrote an article about a year and a half ago about how I can now really trust my gut feeling, because my gut instincts are actually really good. I never trusted that when I was drinking, and that became another negative, critical thing that I was always drinking to deal with. My inner critic only saw the ability to criticize more and more and more in order to get me to drink more and more and more. So what we've done is we've created, our inner critic is a habit in itself, a negative habit. We used it to feed our drinking habit and vice versa. And so actually, in order to change our drinking habits, we need to spend a bit of time and pay a bit of attention to our inner critic. Now, the other thing that makes this particularly hard, I think, is that society feeds that inner critic as well, or that inner saboteur, and amplifies that too, because all of the reasons, all the justifications we give ourselves for drinking, because it's been a hard day, or I feel unloved, or I feel sad, or whatever, are all things that society tells us we should be using alcohol for, either through advertising or through words and actions in popular culture. They may well be learned behaviours from our family, from people that we've seen drink, from our friends. So actually the societal norm also tells us to feed our inner critic with alcohol, that all of these emotions that the inner critic brings up are things that alcohol can deal with. And so you see, we're not just battling against our voice and how we've amplified that in a desire to drink, but society does that too, and it normalises that. So I bet you now that some of you even said this week, oh, a friend has said that you've had a bad week, you deserve a drink, or it's been a stressful week at work, I bet you're looking forward to a drink, and all of that sort of stuff. All of that normalises those justifications your inner critic continually bombards you with in order to get you to have a drink. So again, we're fighting against a habit that we've created, an inner critic habit, and we're fighting against some societal norms that have helped feed that too. And I do always want to pull back on some of the societal norms, because we often come back, particularly if we're people who are moderating, to that idea that somehow we can become a normal drinker. And yes, it is possible to be a moderate drinker, but there's no such thing as a normal drinker. I think what we're doing is we're choosing to use a drug of a particular kind, and some people can manage using that drug better than others. But there isn't this somehow mythical normal drinker. There are people that may not have built up such bad habits as us. There are people that haven't, fed their inner critic and created such habitual triggers than us. But I don't ever want you to think that somehow there is this utopian normal out there, and that it's not, and that not drinking is not normal. That's a dominant social narrative that we're continuing to fight against. And I want you to know that actually not drinking is also normal. Lots of people do it. They don't shout about it in the same way, but actually it's fine to be a happy, content, rounded, lovable, excitable, social human being without alcohol as well. So I want to keep coming back to that, because I really feel that that it's about reframing who we are in society, and actually not drinking can also be normal. Drinking less can be normal. Is normal. Can be. Is normal. Okay, so I've talked about how our inner critic is totally amplified by all of those triggers, both in terms of the habit we've dealt with, and how society and advertising manipulates it. But what makes our inner voice so powerful? Because we know it, we all know, we've all talked about the fact you can call it the wine witch if you like, you can call it your drink demon, you can call it whatever you like, but we all know it's there. And even if drinking wasn't our goal, and giving up cake, which might be my current goal, I've got a cake monster. It's a bit like a cookie monster, isn't it? I've got a cake monster at the minute that goes, oh, but you've swum 2,010 metres today and you worked really hard and look, that muscle's hurting. Maybe you deserve a piece of cake. Maybe you can have a piece of cake. You've clearly burnt loads of calories. That inner voice is still very strong and very dominant, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And we know it's there. But what makes it so strong? Well, first of all, scientists reckon that about a quarter of our conscious awake moments consist of our inner dialogue, and it feels very real, because it's probably the most dominant conversation we have in the day, which is with ourselves. And so it's a really important part of your conscious and awake being. It makes us aware of our existence and who we are. But we're continually, if you think about it, we're continually monitoring who we are in the here and now using our inner voice. We're going, right, I'm trying to get from A to B. And you can see people, for example, at the tube station, working out where the best place to stand on the platform is, you know, where to position themselves against other people, how quickly they might be able to get off the tube in order to get to where they're going. We're continually working towards goals in our head during the day, whether that be getting from A to B, or whether that be longer term goals. There's continually an inner dialogue going on. We're continually monitoring how well we're doing against that. And it also helps us create verbal memories. So we remember what we're doing, probably because we've verbalized that situation that we're in. So a quarter of our day, we're having this inner conversation with ourselves. So it's no surprise that that can also be an internal conflict that's going on as well, whether it be about the right route to somewhere. Oh, should we go via this tube line or that tube line? Or it could be about, you know, is it really worth trying this goal? I'm feeling really miserable about it. Blah, blah. And then another part of you will go, yeah, but, you know, drinking was really bad for me and it was really getting me down and la, la, la. You know, those inner dialogues continue to go on for a quarter of your awake day. And also, the sound of our own voice is the most powerful voice that we hear. In fact, we find our own voice the most attractive voice. I was listening to a scientist today who told us that. And so actually, the most persuasive voice for any of us that we can ever encounter is our own voice, and we're listening to it a quarter of the time every day. So actually, our inner voice is incredibly powerful, which is another reason why we need to start being able to tame that negative voice that may be throwing us off course every day. Because nagging yourself continually every day is tiring. And having a voice that's continually putting you down is just as tiring as having your mother stood next to you doing exactly the same thing, because your voice pattern's probably quite similar, which is why parents nagging is probably quite annoying. So if you just think that the most influential voice in your life is yourself, and you're listening to yourself a quarter of the time every day, then you need to learn to train yourself to give you better messages that will help you to achieve your goal. And actually, if any of you have, this happens to me quite a lot, which is that if I've got a day where I'm feeling really down about myself and I'm feeling really negative, it's actually really tiring listening to my internal dialogue. And if that lasts for a few days at a time, I'm exhausted. And that's just the same as if anybody was nagging you, but even more so because it's probably bigger in volume if it's yourself. So there's no wonder that a continual nagging from yourself can actually tire you out, make it harder for you to keep to your goals, and at some point you might give in. So that's why we need to regain control of our inner voice and work out how we stop it being a critic and start it helping us be the person that we want to be, and let it be a tool to get us to where we want to go. The other thing is, once you've decided to change a habit, your inner critic goes nuts, right? Because you're trying to do something difficult. And we talk about discomfort an awful lot in Club Soda. The discomfort is what some people call craving, but is when basically in your head, and it is all in your head, you're going, well, now I'd normally have a drink because I'm stressed and I'm happy and I want a drink now and I can't have it. And your inner critic starts to go a bit mental because it starts trying to give you reasons why you should be having a drink. Oh, because this is too difficult and it's too hard and I'm tired and I'm thirsty and la la la. And you have to resist that, and resisting that inner critic is quite hard work. And so your inner critic's going nuts because you are stopping taking the path of least resistance. Because the path of least resistance is to pick up a drink and go, sod it, I'm gonna have a drink now. And it's easier just to give in. And that's what your inner critic wants. It wants to nag you enough so that you can just give in. And therefore not giving in is quite hard work. And your inner critic will work really hard to try and get you to do that. So it'll go a bit nuts, a bit bananas. It will fill in all sorts of ways for you to, niggly ways to try and get you to drink. you'll try and like be really, it will find all sorts of underhand ways. Well, you know, maybe I'll start again tomorrow, or, oh, I've not drunk for a week. This is where the ambivalence comes in. Maybe I can moderate tonight, or, well, I'll have more than 2 drinks tonight because it's a party and there's a D in the day, or there's been a terrible disaster, or, you know, it's just been the sun's out. You know, it will begin to find reasons for us to not achieve our goal, and it will want us to deal with discomfort by giving in. So not only has your inner critic been very well practiced over the last few years of drinking, but it's now also going nuts because you're trying to do something hard and difficult and you're getting discomfort, and it just wants you to do what your brain has always done, which is take the path of least resistance and have a drink. So do you get what's going on now? Your brain's a bit of a shitstorm, and it's a fight going on in there, and I feel that all the time. Sharon, ignore the sun. It's just a big hot thing in the sky. No one needs it, and it definitely, you don't need a drink. So how are you going to deal with that inner critic? Because as time goes on, and as you get triggers that might be in the way, or as you get discomfort, your mind will be going, well, you're just a lost cause. I cannot tell you how many times people say that on this group. I'm just a lost cause. I've done a day 1 again. Or I'm not sure if I can take this up again. That's because your inner critic has won, and it's won by telling you negative, horrible things about yourself. Well, you know what? You're going to have to stand up against that inner critic and start really taking it seriously, because this is the fight that you have complete control over. You might not have control over other things in your environment, but you've got control over what's going on with that inner critic in your head, and you need to tame it. And the important thing you need to know about your inner critic and taming it is that the more you practice doing it, the easier it will become. It's a skill like anything else. And the more that you practice and the more that you deal with it, the more that the positive you that's inside your head will be able to wave and go, woohoo, here's me. And begin to dilute the inner critic that you've strengthened so well over the last few years. So, how are you going to deal with this inner critic? Well, first of all, acknowledge it. Understand that it's there and realise what's going on in your head at this point in time. So when you feel an urge, or when you feel a sense of negativity, or when you're sat thinking and your inner critic pops up, acknowledge that it's there. You may not really have noticed it before. Now you know how influential it is, you can begin to go, so this is my inner voice. Now let's just see what it's trying to tell me. It's normal to have that inner voice, but rather than let it nag away, I want you to take some action. And the first action you can do is to pause, recognise what's happening and acknowledge it, and acknowledge that it's a thought and it's separate from reality. I mean, I've always been convinced that my brain is definitely separate from reality, and actually my experiences of changing my drinking just prove that, right? So just accept that it's a thought. It's not real. It's a thought based on a whole load of triggers going on in your brain right now, because you're probably experiencing some elements of discomfort, and you might have some emotions going on. You might have some triggers happening, and therefore your inner critic's going a bit mad. So acknowledge it. Acknowledge that it's not real. Acknowledge that it's a thought process, and acknowledge that it's not a reflection of reality. So just do that first of all. Then second, you need to challenge it. Now, I've noticed that you're all really quiet, demure people, and you wouldn't all say boo to a goose. Well, most of you will, but your inner critic is there to be challenged. It's not there to be accepted as fact. It's there to be go, hang on a minute. I've got this thought. How real is it? How real is what it's telling me? So ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? How strong is my craving for alcohol on a scale of 1 to 100 right now? And then what am I thinking right now? Have I got some internal self-debate going on? Is my mind trying to tell me to have a drink because of A, B and C? Really think about what it is that's happening in your head. Then challenge those thoughts. Look for evidence as to why it's actually wrong. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But begin to challenge it with logic, right? I know we all hate logic and fantasy is just far better, right? But in this, I promise you, logic is your best friend. Then try and develop a more positive and helpful logical thought. You need to do this because, like I said, the most influential voice that you will ever hear in this behaviour change is your own. And so you need to be able to tell yourself what's going to be happening instead, what you're going to be doing instead, the positive thing that you want to hear instead. So you need to develop that and begin to say that in your head as well. Repeat it to yourself, whatever that new logical thing is, and then review how strong your craving is now. Because I reckon by the time we've got to the end of that process, you'd have thought, God, the inner critic in my head is a dickhead. And actually, if I really think about it, I am an amazing person. I have done really well. And you know what? This isn't reality. It's just a piece of discomfort I've got to go through. And, oh, you know what? I don't need this. My craving's going away. So you see that through taking this through a process by recognising what you're doing, asking what it feels like, asking and thinking through what it's telling you, and then challenging it, and then really, trying to put your cravings on a scale, you can begin to see how powerful changing your thoughts are. So how do you counteract your inner critic with logic? I can't believe I'm talking about logic. This should be Yusi, really. He's more logical than me, definitely more logical than me. But first of all, you need to use your own voice and say positive statements out loud. I can do this. I am a really good, strong, confident person. I am, doing something that's really difficult. I am beautiful, I am strong, I'm amazing. Right, I never really liked all of that positive reinforcement, talking about yourself in the mirror in the morning. But I get it when you tell me it's about counteracting my negative inner me, and it's about using the most powerful voice that I have in my world, which is my own. And so being able to say that out loud positively with an I am, I can, is actually really powerful. Now it makes sense to me, right? And it's not just a load of woo-woo. It's actually saying, scientifically, this voice here is the most influential voice that I'm ever going to hear. So there are many ways that you can challenge it. So let me give you an example. So, because this comes up a lot. Oh God, right, I've given up drinking, but now I'm just eating more. So either way, I'm going to be fat. I may as well give up now. Really common, the fact that, we hit the minstrels, the red velvet cupcakes, the whatever you all put on your list that I asked you last week. Now, there are many ways that you can challenge this thought. First of all, where's the evidence that there's no point in doing this anymore if you're not losing weight? Are there other benefits you're getting from changing your drinking? How bad was your drinking? How did it make you feel before? How much better are you feeling now? Is this only about weight? Is it worth giving it up just because you've eaten a packet of minstrels? Will a packet of minstrels give you a headache tomorrow? Is that something you feel you can deal with later? And is it really true that there are no other good reasons for changing your drinking other than weight loss? I suspect there are many other reasons, so write them down, think them through, challenge it and say to your inner critic, no, actually it's not just about the fact that I've put on 2 pounds. I'm actually feeling happier and more content in myself. I'm sleeping better. I'm got more energy in the mornings. I'm more present for the people that I love in my life. So begin to remember all of these things. And also remember that what we've told you is that it's not unusual to crave sugar and sweet things when you first change your drinking. So what you're doing is going through something quite normal. So remind yourself that you're doing and feeling something that's normal to everyone else. And in fact, you can even come on the group and just say to people, I've got this feeling at the minute and my inner critic's going a bit bonkers. What shall I do? And people will say to you, yeah, that happened to me as well. God, we're all quite similar, aren't we? Then you need to remind yourself, you know, will starting drinking again make me thinner either? No, it probably won't. Will it make you happier with your body and who you are? No, it probably won't. How would you feel about your relationship with alcohol if you just gave up now? You know, after all this work you've put in, all this discomfort you've gone through, how will you feel if, you know, you hit the fuck it button and you give up now? How would that make you feel? So really think through those scenarios and really think through the logic behind it. And, you know, how would you feel about yourself? So really begin to challenge your inner critic with logic. The other thing you could do is to give your inner critic a different personality and give it a different voice. If your voice is the most influential and powerful voice that there is, then give your inner critic another voice. I wanted to say Donald Trump, but I decided that might be too political, and I'm not sure anyone wants that voice in their head all day. But it may be that you can think of like Homer Simpson or somebody where, you know, it's just a dumb voice. And is it your dumb voice coming through rather than your critical voice? Give it, you know, a personality and a voice that is one that you wouldn't trust. And, you know, and even give it a name. Oh God, I was about to say Gary then, but that wouldn't be right, would it? Oh, it's Beano, it's Dennis the Menace, it's whatever coming out to play. And I don't, you know, I'm not listening to them anymore, so tough shit. The fifth thing you can do is to prove your inner critic wrong, right? Now, when we were drinkers, we were quite belligerent, weren't we? Oh, well, you're not stopping me drinking. You know, no government information is going to stop me drinking. I really enjoy drinking. Belligerent. I'm not giving up just because, you know, somebody's told me I have to. So channel that belligerence and channel it against your inner critic and say, I'm going to prove my inner critic wrong. In fact, I'm going to write down that today my inner critic told me I can't do this, and tomorrow I'm going to look at this and know that I can because I've done another day. So really square up to your inner critic and challenge them. Prove it wrong. Put that power to better use. And then just remember that your inner critic is still just a thought. It is not a command, right? It's not anything you have to act upon. You can just go, oh, there's my inner critic, Minnie the Minx again. What a pain in the ass she is. But I'm not going to do what she says because, you know, that would be destroying my goals. It would make me feel a bit shit. And I was doing so well. So, you know, remember, it's a thought, not a command. I'm going to come back to some of your questions in a minute, by the way, guys. So finally, how might you deal with this? And I'm going to go back to using Whoop, because Whoop's quite a good way to deal with this still, because Whoop allows you to reflect and recognise that your inner critic is a trigger and make a plan for what happens when it comes and visits, like umpteen times a day. So maybe have a little think about what your current inner critic strong arguments are. What are the arguments it's using at the minute? And then it could be weather, it could be saying that that maybe you could try moderating, it could be saying that you've got some weddings coming up in the next few weeks and may as well not try moderating till after then. It may be a whole host of things. But work out what the strong arguments are that your inner critic's using at the minute that you're finding the hardest to resist. Then state your wish. I wish to not let my inner critic derail my goals. And if I manage this, the outcome is that I'm going to be really happy that I've kept the goal that I've set myself. And as we know, if I achieve that goal, I will feel a lot happier as a person. I'll be more present. Whatever those things are that you've written down that you feel you get out of changing your drinking. So your wish is to make sure your inner critic doesn't derail you. And the outcome you're after is that beautiful outcome of what happens when you've got to where you want to be with alcohol. And then think about those inner critic strong points, because they're your obstacles. So my current obstacles that the inner critic is throwing up at the minute is it's telling me that apparently I am not going to be a supermodel if I give up drinking. This obviously was a great disappointment to me when I found this out, but you know, I've learned to live with it and cope with it, and you guys can as well. So, you know, think about those arguments it's been using. You know, you're not gonna suddenly become, you know, stick thin. It might be using all sorts of arguments. It might be giving you negative thoughts. It might be, as one of you just said, that you need a break from yourself. No, you don't need a break from yourself. You need to celebrate yourself every moment of every day, right? So if your inner critic is telling you that you're too boring for you to even spend time with yourself, you can give the inner critic a big old finger like this and say, no, actually, I'm going to learn to love my own company. So write down all of the obstacles and the niggles and the things that it's telling you, and then make a plan. So when this inner critic tells me that I'm just too boring to even be with myself, my plan is to maybe take up a hobby that I can do that's very positive for me, that might only take a few minutes. Doesn't have to, you know, you don't suddenly have to create Van Gogh work of art. You might just want to do a few small things at home that are craft based. You might want to read a self-help book. You might want to do something that's positive and enriching and nourishing for you. You might want to learn about being alone versus loneliness, which is something that I'm very passionate about, because there is some beautiful restorative time you get from being alone, which is very different from being lonely. So, you know, maybe you need to begin to make a list of the things that you'll do. So the minute your inner critic starts to challenge you, you can say, no, inner critic, I don't need alcohol for those things because I'm doing this instead, and I believe this instead. And I believe I'm an amazing person. I deserve to be energetic. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be content with myself. I deserve to be able to go out when I want to. Whatever it is. But write down the logical statements that will bat it back, and think of maybe a few things that you might do to deal with the discomfort, right? Because what you are doing is telling your inner critic to fuck off, right? Basically. And the more you can do that, the better you get at it. It's really simple. It's like a skill. I know, I never thought I'd be developing skills still at this age, but who knew? So it's a new skill, and the more you do it, the less effort it takes, and the better you'll be at it, and the less likely your inner critic will be to knock you off your goal. It's as simple as that. Sounds really simple, but really, I cannot underestimate how much practice makes in this stuff. And come on the group and say to people, my inner critic has been doing this or that. Remember when came on earlier in the year and talked about her wine witch? Well, her wine witch is her inner critic, and she really threw everything back at it and wrote down actually that internal dialogue that happened. It was amazing. So it is possible to do that, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, the stronger you will be, and the more those negative thoughts will just be that, thoughts that you bat away and get on with your life. So telling it off works. Cool. So just checking there isn't any specific questions. So justifying the extra sugar from sweet things because you've cut out booze. Yeah, I never ate cake before either, because why would you eat cake when you can have a glass of wine? Why would you have dessert when you could have a glass of wine? But you know what? It makes it easier to make good decisions about food when you haven't got alcohol spiking your blood sugar levels. So it might be something you can worry about, Fanny LaRue, but you might want to just not worry about it quite so much now and deal with the bigger issue. But not allow your inner critic to go, oh, that's it, you've been eating a whole bag of minstrels, so you're clearly failing because you've just swapping one habit for another business. Oh, load of old bollocks. So just go, actually, just recognise that you're eating slightly more sweet stuff, but say that's not going to stop me giving up drinking just because I've changed another eating habit, because actually in the longer term this will be better for me and I'll be able to control my eating in the longer term. And you know, you could probably still put a quota on the amount of cake you eat if you're a bit worried, but don't deny yourself too many things all at once, otherwise you'll explode. Can you imagine if you're trying to do a massive diet at the same time as giving up drinking and doing loads of exercise? Your inner critic will be going mental and you'll internally combust. That is actually factually what will happen. You'll internally combust. So make sure you're not, by failing at one other thing, one other aligned goal, you end up failing on the whole goal because your inner critic has gone mental. Okay, so... Oh... And Sharon says, when the craving hits me, I tell myself I'm an adult. Who knew? And I can have a drink if I want to, and then I make a choice that it's no, I don't want to. You're right. And there's another thing you can do, which is say, you know, if I say yes to a drink now, what am I saying no to tomorrow or later on? So don't forget, you've got all of these tools, and they're all logical tools if you think about it. Telling yourself what you can do instead is a logical tool to combat your inner critic. Yeah, you definitely get more sun without a hangover. That's absolutely right. See, today our food delivery was late, so I didn't go out swimming as early as I hoped to, and I did that moping around thinking, oh, it's too hard to get on public transport. The district line's not even going all the way today, and I nearly didn't do it. And then my inner critic said, if you don't get in the pool today, Jill will win the swimming challenge, and you can't let that happen. You see? You can beat it with logic. Cool. Right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. As always, this is about developing skills and undoing loads and loads of hard wiring that's been built up over years and years and years. So, you know, cut yourself some slack. You're doing something hard. You're doing something that is ingrained and very habitual, and you're unpicking the bits one by one. Somebody was talking about crochet earlier. It's a bit like undoing the crochet, but probably not as quick. Okay, we may have worked out that I've never done crochet. Okay,